We all know Milsurp values are wild right now, but are there any forgotten guns that punch above their price tag? A couple months ago, I put together a video covering the most overpriced military surplus firearms. And with skyrocketing collector values, that was an easy list to make. But it got me thinking. Sure, there are plenty of overvalued Milsurp guns out there, but are there any that are flying under the radar? Are there any sleeper military surplus weapons that offer hidden value in today's market? Well, that's what we're getting into today. My picks for the top 5 most undervalued military surplus firearms on the collector market right now. This list will take into account price, availability, ammo cost, performance, historical significance, and of course, cool factor. These aren't just the cheapest CNR guns out there, like Carcano or Enfield rifles. They're the ones that are often overlooked, but still offer surprising bang for your buck, even with rising prices across the board. Let's get into it. We're starting out our list here with what might be a bit of a surprising pick. This is the French Mass 4956, and I'll be the first to admit that these are by no means cheap firearms. I do think they offer a compelling value for what they are, however. They are a true, unadulterated Cold War battle rifle, and at today's prices, they're coming in between about $600 and $1,000. The value proposition offered by the 4956 really comes in when we compare it to its Cold War contemporaries. The first comparable full-power battle rifle that comes to mind is the FAL, which these days are pretty much always fetching more than $1,000, and the vast majority of those rifles are not in their original configuration. Most Cold War rifles were designed and produced as select fire weapons. And of course, machine gun configuration firearms are prohibited from being imported into the United States as is. This means that the vast majority of FAL, G3, SETME, M14, AK, and even M16 pattern firearms cannot be brought into the country and sold in their original military configuration. The French Mass 4956 does not suffer from any such limitations. These firearms were designed as semi-autos from the ground up, and they have been brought into the country in numbers with no modifications whatsoever. True original military configuration semi-automatic weapons at a price that a lot of times is lower than its modified contemporaries. The 4956 has a lot going for it, but unfortunately it's not all roses. They are chambered in the 7.5mm French cartridge, and that ammunition is pretty hard to get your hands on, and when you can find it, it's pretty darn expensive. So although the rifles come in at a value price point, they're not exactly the cheapest to shoot. These guns do get high points for functionality and cool factor though. They have pretty good aperture style sights, a nice trigger, extremely smooth loading with French clips, an easily detachable 10-round box magazine, reliable, true direct gas impingement operation, and equipped with super cool grenade launching hardware at the front. Now with 4956 rifles chambered in that original French 7.5 cartridge, it's always important to keep in mind that they can suffer from dangerous slam fires if the firing pins are original. Luckily, there are ways to correct those issues, and that's certainly something you want to look into if you're going to be doing any shooting with your rifle. And before we move on to the next undervalued firearm on our list, I think it's important to mention that the example of Mass 4956 that I've been showing today happens to be chambered in 7.62 NATO. A couple decades ago, Century Arms imported a bunch of these guns into the US, and to help them sell on a US market, they converted them from 7.5 French to 7.62 NATO. Historically, those Century Arms examples have been a bit infamous for reliability issues. My particular example here has never encountered a malfunction and is a fantastic shooter. If you are considering a 7.62 NATO chambered example for ammunition savings, keep in mind you are rolling the dice, but who knows, maybe that dice roll will pay off big time for you like it did me. This is the Italian Beretta M1951, another Cold War era firearm, however this time a handgun, and these guys are chambered in standard 9mm NATO. These are a classic, beautiful, sleek design, reliable, and pretty darn good shooting pistols. With a current market value of $500 to $600, however, I wouldn't necessarily call them undervalued. And that's where number 4 on our top 5 list comes in. The Egyptian clone of the Beretta 1951, the Helwan. The Egyptian Helwan is essentially an exact copy of its Italian counterpart, but at a lower price on the current collector market. Yes, the fit and finish on these Egyptian clones isn't quite up to the standard that you would expect from a Beretta original, but they are still really solid Milsurps that make for good shooters. Like the model 1951, this is a single action, semi-automatic service handgun with a single stack magazine, chambered in 9mm NATO. When the Mahdi-made Helwan, sometimes referred to as the Brigadier, were first being imported, they were extremely cheap firearms. Of course, prices on basically everything has risen in recent years, so they're no longer super cheap, but it's not at all uncommon to encounter a Helwan for $400 or maybe even a little bit less. A good shooting, accurate, reliable Milsurp handgun chambered in 9mm NATO at about $400 is a great value in my opinion. That makes these Beretta clones about the same cost as a Tokarev, but with that 9mm chambering, you're going to spend half as much on ammunition. You can do a lot of shooting with one of these pistols without a lot of money, and that's why the Helwan has made the list. For years now, Swiss straight pull rifles have been one of the underappreciated value kings as far as military surplus firearms go. This is a Gewehr 1911 long rifle, and of the Swiss rifle lineup, I think the G11 and G9611 are the most underrated firearms. Just like all of our Smith-Rubin action guns, the G1911 has fantastic build quality, and they are extremely accurate rifles. Chambered in the awesome 7.5 Swiss cartridge and fed with an excellent stripper clip, these are great shooting rifles. Let's be honest here for a second. I've been beating the drum for Swiss rifles here on the channel for years at this point, but I'm not going to shut up anytime soon because in my opinion, these guns are still grossly undervalued. Right here, right now in 2025, these rifles are available on the C&R market for $400 or less, and that is an outstanding value proposition in my opinion. I don't know if it's even possible to acquire a better shooting Milsurp bolt action for less money. I mean seriously, just the idea that you can get behind a Swiss G11 or 9611 for something like $380 is mind-blowing, but I promise you it will not be that way forever. When new imports of these awesome rifles finally dry up, the price is going to explode, and if you don't already have one in your collection at that point, you're going to be kicking yourself for not doing so. And although I think the long rifles are offering the best value from our Swiss Milsurps, K11 and K31 carbines are still very aggressively priced themselves, and in my opinion, pretty darn undervalued as well. Next up on our list is one of the very few World War II handguns that haven't become completely unaffordable these days. I'm referring to the venerable VZ-27 that served both Czechoslovakia and Nazi Germany in the Second World War. These are a single action only, auto-loading service handgun chambered in .32 auto. Now 32 ACP is certainly not the most impressive cartridge, but that didn't stop it from being in the holster of hundreds of thousands of soldiers in the Second World War. This single-stacked magazine, simple blowback operation handgun was developed by Czechoslovakia and adopted by their military. However, upon German occupation of Czechoslovakia, these pistols were placed into service by the Wehrmacht. There are both pre-war and post-war examples of these pistols out there. The most valuable VZ-27s will be the ones with German service markings. At this point, any German World War II weapon is extremely collectible, and the values across the board keep going up and up and up at a very extreme rate. The VZ-27 has not been an exception to that. These were once considered a value bin pea shooter, but the prices are finally starting to catch up. It hurts to admit it, but these days a German mark example is usually going for about $600 on today's collector market. Even at that $600 price point, however, the VZ-27 is still a lot cheaper than most other World War II service handguns, especially those used by Germany. And since these guns were underrated and underappreciated for so long, it's still possible to run across a deal. I picked up my example here last year for only $350. And sure, the condition of my example isn't fantastic, and it does have mismatched serial numbers, but it is still a fantastic shooting pistol and a true piece of World War II history. To this day, people sleep on the VZ-27, but I think this is a handgun that we will continue to see go up in value over time, and at today's prices, I think they offer a compelling value, especially if you're lucky enough to run across a deal. While we're on the subject of underrated 32 ACP handguns, I think I'll quickly mention another 32 pistol that was made in Czechoslovakia. This is the VZ-50, and although they don't have much military service provenance, these are serially underrated handguns, simple blowback action, quite similar to a Walther PP or PPK. They're reliable and pretty decent shooters, and best of all, you can still find one here or there for about $300. The list of CNR handguns that fall into that price point is steadily declining over time, so if you're looking for a 32 ACP, but something like the VZ-27 is a little out of your price range, the VZ-50 or VZ-70 might be a good value compromise. Before we get to our number one most overvalued military surplus firearm, I thought I would give you guys a quick honorable mention. This unique semi-automatic Cold War era carbine is a Czech VZ-52. The VZ-52 is often compared to the SKS, but this is a distinctly different design and a very interesting one it is. With its side-folding bayonet and overall really striking look, this is a super cool gun. VZ-52s are not exactly cheap these days, but I do believe these really neat carbines are underestimated, overlooked, and ultimately undervalued when we compare them to some other options out there. It's not too difficult to get your hands on one in the original 7.62 by 45mm cartridge for about $600, which puts it in that SKS price level. But if you're willing to invest your time and money into an example that's more of a fixer-upper, you might be able to score one of these rifles for way less than that. Due to high ammunition cost, these Czech Milsurps aren't quite undervalued enough to make the list, but as an honorable mention, I think it deserves a spot. And we finally made it to number one. My opinion on the de facto king of undervalued military surplus firearms on today's market, Turkish Mausers chambered in 8mm. 8mm chambered Mausers of all types offer really interesting value simply due to the ammunition they use. This cartridge is one of the very last full power rifle cartridges that is being offered on the market as true surplus at extremely good prices. These days, ammunition for bolt action rifles generally starts at about $1 a round, Well, in the case of 8mm Mauser, you can still get this stuff for about 50 cents a round, or in really large quantities, maybe even less than that. And that is amazing if you actually want to shoot your guns. And that results in a lot of Mauser variants being a really good value. We're talking Yugoslavian Mausers, Spanish Mausers, Czech Mausers, not so much German because the guns themselves are so expensive, and of course, Turkish Mausers. Turkish Mausers chambered in 8mm are simply one of the cheapest Mauser variants available on the market, period. Let's be real, even Yugoslavian Mausers have a baseline price of about $500 to $600 these days. As far as Turkish Mausers go, I still run across them on the regular for $400 or less. I literally encountered 2 good shooter grade condition rifles at the last gun show for like $385. The prospect of being able to invest about $400 on a gun and then acquire tons of ammunition for literally the best price available on the market is a value no-brainer. On the collector market, Turkish Mausers have been looked down on for years. I think that's mainly due to the fact that they're usually mismatched or converted from older rifles. That does not mean these are low-quality firearms, though. A Turkish Mauser will shoot just as good as pretty much any other 8mm Mauser out there in similar condition. So if we're looking at price, availability, functionality, ammo logistics, historical provenance, and cool factor, it is nearly impossible to beat the value offered by Turkish Mausers, and that's why it's number 1 on our top 5 undervalued military surplus firearm list. Now, I know some of you are probably yelling at your screen right now because I left out what you think is the most undervalued Milsurp. If I didn't include your Milsurp on this list, let me know about it down in the comments. I would love to get your opinion. I have a feeling we're going to see SKS on there a whole lot, and leaving it out might have been a mistake. For now, though, that does it for this one. If you want to hear the other side of this discussion and my top 5 most overpriced military surplus firearms, you can check that out right here. I will link it above and down in the description. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to hit it with a thumbs up to help it out with the algorithm. Subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any of my future military surplus firearms content. I want to say a huge thank you to everybody out there watching, and I will catch you in the next video. See you then. Peace.